taking simple beats and putting them all together. So to me, that's a little different than if you look at, say, like even bass lines for symphonies. You have a bunch of different moving parts, but they all are part of the bass line. So it's a little different to me.
The comparison, the rock and classical comparison is really interesting because I look at rock as being like, like a child of that directly.
Well, yeah, I think so too, because
the instrumentation.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're taking,
and the composition.
Yeah.
Song structure even probably comes from.
Well, because even if you look at classical musics that are like for operas, because you have singing in conjunction with the symphony, you have those different parts that work together, just the same as with rock. When you have like the different parts that are, for good rock song, in my opinion, you have the instruments that are supporting the singing, but can also stand alone on their own without the singer. And using those two things together to make the song, you find that a lot with rock and like orchestra. You don't really get that as much with like rap or hip-hop because it's primarily about the singing. And yeah, you have your beats and things.
It's artist-led or vocalist-led in a sense.
Yeah. And
as opposed to
more cohesive togetherness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. Where it's less about the front man or who the stage person is, in a sense where like Snoop Dogg is only important because Snoop Dogg is the act.
Yeah.
Right? But then you have a band and you don't really talk about so and so from that band.
Well,
unless you're doing a gossipy like fandom deep dive. Like, right?
So okay, when you think about bands and people being fans of bands, you you have your main likable person, which is usually the singer, but you also have a lot of people who talk about, ooh, that drummer, or ooh, that guitarist. With hip-hop and rap, it's all about the singing rapper person. You don't really hear much about like who's the one that's actually making these beats, or who are they actually sampling from, unless it's something that's already famous.
They put a tag on the beat so you know who the producer is. But also,
and even then, people don't necessarily care about that as much.
Unless they're already in like a producer or a rapper themselves.
Exactly.
They're the only ones that do care.
Yeah.
Unless you're Khaled, where you break through that and you create a personality that is marketable on its own.
Yeah. Well, even then, I would say Snoop Dogg, his personality is the thing that's a market. Same with, like, Eminem is interesting because it's his music as well as his personality that made his brand. Right now, like, his music is not the same as it was when he first, like, shot through the roof. But, like, his personality is what everyone remembers.
You know what I think is interesting about Eminem? He used to be so much more vocal, where you got to see more of what he was thinking, because he would say it directly to you. Nowadays, you get a more like well thought out, almost cautious of what he says Eminem.
Well, it's
like,
also
outside of just making music.
I also think that that's partially because he's older now, and he's had a lot of time to reflect, and he's not going to have the same reactions to things as you do when you're a young, volatile, like up and coming star.
Right.
Like, he cemented his legacy. He's had good press, he's had bad press, he's had a lot of time and experience to deal with all this, so it makes sense. Like, now he's not going to like go off the cuff, especially since like now he's had a taste of consequences for when he does stuff.
He has this song, or he has this verse on the Fat Joe song that came out like a couple years ago maybe, where he talks about he's an opportunist and that he hops at any opportunity to do this. I'm messing up his lyrics, but where he basically says is that he gets like some sort of rush from the way that he makes people feel about his words still to this day. And that's why I do it, because like when I write lyrics, I know that the people who get it are gonna fucking get it.
Yeah.
And it's gonna hit them in a way that they could bring up in a joke-like manner, almost, in a sense, because a lot of my stuff has a lot of humor in it. You know what I'm saying? But you have to be kind of on my wavelength to understand my humor. Yeah. Because it's not for everybody, that's for sure.
Well, and like, I think that's why if you go look online if you type up to find lyrics, you'll almost always find comments or like, ooh, these lyrics mean this or whatever, or even the writers who are having to, explain, no, I actually meant like this. Like,
oh, on Genius, like the
yeah,
website
yeah,
Genius.
yeah. That is a perfect example because they have the annotations that you can add in there.
Yeah.
It's funny because, like, okay, like Tool, the band Tool, for example, like, he puts a lot of meaning into his lyrics, and like,
dude, I heard the Tool is just like, my best friend is into Tool, and
my boyfriend is a Tool fan.
What is it about them?
Like, I honestly, I've recently rediscovered how much I actually really love Tool. Like, I love their music, and I grew up listening to it. Like, when I was a kid listening to the rock radio station, like, they were almost always on there with many different songs. But, like, on surface level, it's good. If you try to go a little bit deeper, it's good. It's catchy. Like, it's different than a lot of, like, other mainstream stuff that you hear, but it's still palatable enough for people who like mainstream stuff to get into it. Or, you know, it could be more meaningful if you look more into it, because, like, he did a lot of psychedelics, and, like, he had a lot of, like, mental experiences that shifted his perspective of things in the world, and he puts that into his lyrics. So he puts a lot of himself into his music, and like, my boyfriend explained to me once, like, and he watched some live footage of him, but, like, he gets really into it when he's on stage.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where he, I guess, sometimes gets self-conscious, and he doesn't necessarily do that right up on stage. But, like, that's the type of vibe that I really enjoy, and that's why I like Apocalyptica so much, because, like, they bring so much. You can feel that they're feeling the music, like, even just by listening to them, watching them.
So their performance is something.
Yeah, and it comes across, even if you're not watching them play, like, even in, like, the way they play, because bringing it back to orchestral music, the amount of feeling that you can convey with just instruments, like, it's kind of incredible to me, because you can provoke so many different types of deep feelings just from that. And, like, when you have an artist who is also really into, like, the feeling of the music, and it comes across, that to me is just, yes. That is, like, the best type of music.
Yeah. Because,
like, you have plenty of other people out there that make good music, and it's catchy and it gets popular, but they're not, like, feeling that music. Does that make sense?
Yeah. How do you think the artist taps into that?
Well, honestly, I think you have to, one, enjoy what you're doing, and, like, for me, when I was playing, or even when I sing, and, like, I can only do it in my car by myself. I'm not ballsy enough to do it in front of people yet, but, like, when you're hitting those things, and it's the type of music that you really like for me, I like singing lower, because for a girl I can sing kind of low, and I like the reverberation, which is also really why I like bass instruments and bass music. But, like, when you're playing something that you really enjoy and you're really hitting it, it's just, it, like, takes it to that just another level, and it's just its own type of euphoria.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's like its own, like you said, it's like a rush. It's like
you are connecting with the music in a way that's, like, I don't even know how to fully explain unless you've, like, experienced it yourself.
Right. Or unless you've observed it, like, at an obsessive level, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because, like, a lot of people learn from just, like, getting as close as a screen. You know?
Or just through their earbuds.
I grew up right before the iPod generation. Actually, the first iPod, the first gen, it was given away as a gift in a raffle at my graduation party. You know how they do a party at the end of that joint?
Yeah.
Well, I won the winning ticket for an iPad.
Nice.
Or for the iPod. And you know what's crazy about it is if I would have gotten, like, 2 more spots earlier, I could have got a car.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Damn.
So I got an iPod instead of a car.
I mean, like, I remember when all iPods first came out, and that was, like...
Here's the plot twist. It was like a $1,500 car. It was like somebody donated it.
Oh.
It was like a Ford.
I see.
A Ford Escort or some shit. And you know what was hella funny about it? Is, like, the kid who won it, I remember thinking to myself, like, God damn, how did this fucking kid win it? You know what I'm saying? And then I was like, if I would have won that car, I probably would have flipped it. You know, to be honest, because I don't think I could have. Because I was driving already a Honda Accord, like it was painted orange, like candy paint, like it was a clean little car. So if I would have won it, what the fuck would I have done with it? You know? So I took the iPod. There was also like a TV or like, you know, people are gonna hear this that went to school with me. They're gonna be like, it wasn't a fucking TV. It was a laptop or some stupid shit. But I don't know. That's not important. The important part is that the fucking car was real. It was like $1,500. And shout out to the kid who won it. He was a nice kid. I don't think I ever had any problems with him. But I think one of his homeboys tried to jack my fucking Disney picture back in kindergarten.
What?
I put it in my desk. You know the top that comes down?
Yeah.
I had a frame and we did show and tell. And I put it in my desk. And I came back and it was gone. But there was a kid who I thought was suspicious when I was doing my presentation or my show and tell. And I was like, okay, I'm going to watch him. And he took my shit.
What?
I caught him.
Something like that happened to me back in 4th grade. My so-called best friend. I had gotten gel pens. And, like, this is back in, like, 2000. So, gel pens in 4th grade.
Sheesh.
Whew. And so, during reading time, we were allowed to color or listen as the teacher read. So, I always colored. And everyone always wanted to borrow the gel pens because that was the 4th grade currency of the time.
It was.
And
it's facts.
Well, apparently
all the hot girls had gel pens. Facts.
I might be an outlier on that, but yeah. Anyway, she apparently decided to steal them one day, and like everyone knew that they were mine because I had them in this like little like pouch thing. And yeah, so like that became a whole big argument fight thing, and I didn't understand why, and especially because like at the time my family, me and my mom, my brother, we were very poor, so this was like a big deal to me because this was like a treat thing that I had, and I cherished it. And she took it, and like she was the type of like rich white girl family where they had a big house where they had horses and shit like that. Like they had like the new consoles and shit like that. And like I could not understand why, of all things, she stole my gel pens.
Dude, I can't believe that shit.
Yep. Yeah.
Dude, what about your ability to find the kids who steal your shit, man? Like,
well, I mean, like,
being a detective at that age, that shit's next level.
Well, and like the thing is, we didn't even have to be detective because everybody knew that she took it because I was the one that had the gel pens, and they were in the same pouch that everybody knew was mine. Mm-hmm. So I did not understand at all. And to this day, 20 years later, I still don't understand.
You see, because I look at it in the same context as like I have a daughter that's close to the age that I was, where I was like so alert that I could sense when people were up to shit.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I remember being at that, well, because like I boil it down for time's sake, trauma. But like even at a young age, I've always been hyper observant and hyper aware of other people. So that also kind of made things hard because I was always aware when people didn't vibe, but at that age I didn't understand why. So I couldn't like overcome that thing. But yeah, kids
putting together all the information. It's crazy how like life will like give you every tool that goes in a toolbox, and by the time you have the toolbox, now you're ready to like build your life.
Yep.
Isn't that crazy?
It kind of is. And I think that's why kids are so observational most of the time, because like they have to take in all this new information just to like find out how the world works, because they're just kind of like discovering it as they go. And like obviously we teach them and stuff, but they basically have to learn by observing. So I don't know, some kids I think are way more observant than we give credit for.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. If
you're a parent that's like, you know, trying to sneak things around your kids or whatever, trying to hide things from your kids, you got to be careful, because those kids are so smart that your kid is your kid, right?
Yeah.
But you're their world.
Yeah.
You know, you're their world, like completely. Everything about you is a universe to them. So they're gonna know you better than you know your goddamn self, to a certain extent, after a certain point.
And because they're so observant, they're going to pick up on things that you don't even necessarily notice that you do, because that's what they have to rely on how to function, I guess, in their own little world. They're like, oh, this is the person that I need to watch. Like, and it's kind of funny because I always stop to think about, like, well, shit, when I was a little kid, what shit did I notice that my parents didn't think I did? Like, there's a lot more that I know that I don't think that my mom knows.
It's just crazy because, like, I think parents, and shout out to all of our parents, but, like, parents like to hide things in plain sight, and then kids are already knowing what's going on with their parents. Like, for example, if you drink around your kid and you think your kid doesn't notice, well, eventually your kid's gonna notice.
Yep.
When your kid can put 2 and 2 together, then they're gonna be like, oh, so dad likes to drink, every weekend. And if that's okay, if that's how you want to raise your kid, that's fine. But you're kind of putting them, in my opinion, I don't want to create any kind of debate amongst parents, but in my opinion, you don't want to put things in front of your kids because it kind of makes them think it's okay from the gate.
Well, it also depends on how it's introduced to them. Like, if the only time that they see someone drinking is their dad on the weekends, then they're going to associate with drinking, like, with a relaxing weekend, at least to start off with.
Or partying on the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. But, like, if they see a parent who, like, every time they come home, one of the first things they do is go grab a beer or a glass of wine, they're going to associate that with something different.
Yeah. A pattern that's more prone to addiction.
Yeah. Well, that's just one example of, like, the very manyest things that we do in our lives that kids are going to notice.
Exactly, because there's behavioral things, too. I mean, that's the reason why we continue to have, like, hatred amongst groups.
Well, yeah.
Because you sometimes will act out of character in a sense where you normally wouldn't want to say anything in front of your child that you would feel shamed about, right? So when you say something that's out of character, maybe you're not too conscientious of who can hear it, and they're sponges, so they take it in real early.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of this, like, inherent hatred that comes for any different kind of group, any kind of different demographic. Like, there's a lot of men out there who hate women.
Oh yeah, I'm well aware.
And they learn it directly, hardlined from their dad.
Well, yeah, and most of it comes from the family, but also it comes from their community, like the people close to them that they interact with, like. So,
true, but if you had to break it to a percentage, I think that it would be pretty heavy on the introductory, the parental, because it'd almost be 90-10, I would think. Because you know how they're saying that your environment, who you are when you come through the door is who you are as you leave, because there's a certain percentage of you that's like the foundation of who you are, and then everything else is environmental. Everything else is what you go through, in a sense.
I feel like environmental is like a very big part of it, but...
Well, yeah, it would be like the 90%. I think we're probably saying the same thing then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing. My bad. That's what I mean.
Well, yeah, because no, don't get me wrong. Like the family thing, getting it passed down from generation to generation, that is definitely there, and I've experienced it with my own family, especially considering like how like my grandparents were. Like, I had a strict English grandfather born in the 30s. He went through World War II as a little kid, and he married a freaking Haitian woman, and then they came to America. So
you got Haitian blood.
Yes. I've got like a mix of stuff, but it's
Have you done the 23andMe?
Yep. My parents are actually also doing the genealogy trees. I actually have a family tree that goes back at least to the 1500s on my grandpa's side in England. Like, he's the outlier. He came to America, but the lines go back to England very far. My grandma, however, she's Haitian, for a couple generations, but a few generations before her, they were like the European descended Haitians that came and immigrated to Haiti, and so Actually, the funny thing is like how she came to America with her family is when Papa Doc came into power, they had this whole, basically, I guess I could say a version of ethnic cleansing where, like, any European descendant, we need to go back to only native people. And so they came to America because it was either leave with what they had with them or get burned alive in their house.
Really?
Yeah. So, like...
Wow.
Because, like, they weren't necessarily poor. They were more affluent, and so that was definitely something that they had against them at the time.
That's wild.
My grandfather, however, was less exciting. He came to America for work because he was an engineer. So, yeah. But, like, the two different cultures, as well as the generational differences that were passed down, like, I still have stuff that I have to recognize in myself because it's been passed down from their generational stuff. And even though I recognize it as bullshit because I grew up with it the whole time, it's kind of really hard to, like, separate it when it's been a part of your identity for so long.
Right.
But
because you rip out the bad and take some of the good.
Yeah. And, like, even with my mom, like I've said in the past, I've been trying to really work on myself and my issues and recognizing that shit. But now I recognize that stuff, some of it in my mom. But she doesn't...
See it herself?
No, and she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to have to recognize that because she in and of herself has her own traumas, which I can see with dealing with my own stuff, and it's really interesting because...
You know what I think is interesting too about trauma? Is like reversing trauma is like stopping a train. Because it's moving in a direction that's powered so, like, incredibly, because it really is your subconscious that pushes your traumas in the direction that they go, right? Because it's not your conscious state, because you would have control over it in some sort of manner.
No.
But it's a subconscious thing. So, but what I think is interesting about it is when you decide to stop the train and start pushing it back in the opposite direction, it really feels like you're putting that kind of effort because of how hard it actually is.
Oh yeah, like, I 100% would say that it is draining. And when I've had, like, if I come to revelations and things on myself, like, I really do sometimes have to, like, take a step back from people because I'm like, nah, I have too much on my mind.
Yeah.
And I don't have, like, the brain power, or I'm, like, my brain is too tired to deal with other things.
Can't deal with this.
I mean, like, it's kind of an extreme way to look at it, in my opinion. That's, like, not how it is all the time, but there are definitely times where dealing with trauma is exhausting.
Yeah. I do believe that the power of the mind can reverse a lot of things if you were to, like, reprogram some of the mind mechanisms that we have. Like, we have our triggers. You know, we know that there's certain, like, words that remind us of things that are so painful.
Yeah.
But what I believe is that when you confront these things and you start to work on yourself, and it's a lot of mental rewiring. It's hard to explain if you've never done it yourself, but
well, because
it's like reversing the triggers.
Well, yeah, it's basically, it's very, well, it's almost the same as, like, when you have a habit that you want to stop it. A habit is a habit for a reason. Like, you don't really necessarily do it consciously. Like, I don't really know how else to define a habit besides a habit.
It's just kind of instinctual.
Yeah, it's so ingrained that you just do it.
Yeah.
And this kind of the same with some trauma. Like, some of the time it's... I'm trying to figure out how I want to word the way I want to word it. Like, trauma can be very repetitive. Like, especially, like, if you have the type of trauma where you have triggers where you'll relive things because the trigger brings you back.
Yeah.
And the repetition in that and the subconscious doing of that, it reminds me of a habit.
Right.
And trying to break habits takes a lot of conscious, repetitive effort to do something to stop yourself from doing the bad habit. And in the essence, you have to make new habits.
There's been times in my life where some of the most like traumatic things that have happened, things will line up. And we're talking like years later. Things will line up in a certain way where it just reminds you a little too closely of what things felt like.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to confront those feelings. Like, that's why they say you're supposed to feel things and embrace them, and then you can let them go.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can't numb yourself to things that you're supposed to face.
No, because you're supposed to be able to process them. And part of trauma sometimes is not being able to process an event or a situation. Like, not to get too deep and personal here, but like, I actually recently have come to terms with the fact that I was raped. Like,
yeah.
I didn't ever really think about it too much, and I hadn't really thought about it until, like, the subject came up in such a way that, like, oh, shit. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was in this situation, and yeah, I was raped.
Yeah.
And that was, like, a big, sudden, like, jolt. Because that happened, like, a few years ago. And, like, I'd never talked about it, I'd never really thought about it, but...
I think that you're so strong and you're so powerful for being able to put something like that in the back of your mind, so to speak, to where you cover it like with something to deal with later. But we never really get to that later.
Yeah.
Because we push it further back and further back and further back. I remember that I've had things that have happened to me in the past as a young kid. And when I revealed these things to my parents later on in life, I was already an adult. But when I did so, it was so freeing because, like, I was able to walk with a clean conscience, so to speak, because I felt as if something that I was forced to be a part of was now, I was letting go.
Yeah.
And I wasn't allowing it to, like, make me feel away. And the funny thing about it is that for years I didn't know that it had control over me in a lot of senses. You know, but it like, those kind of things, they really do dictate the way that you choose to live your life to a certain extent.
Well, yeah, because
you know?
all life is just a series of experiences.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter in what type of way you're experiencing it, whether it's physical, mental, emotionally. It doesn't matter. Everything is just an experience of your consciousness. But especially as little kids, going back to the whole observational thing and picking up so much information, you learn to kind of just like deal with it, or especially because at the time when you're a kid you don't always know how to deal with that kind of stuff, so you kind of set it aside, and then you grow with it, and more stuff gets added on, and then suddenly all of this accumulated trauma is now weighing you down, and now you have to go back and reverse through all of that stuff to get to a point where it's not bogging you down anymore.
Right.
And that takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, some of us aren't fortunate enough to actually spend enough time with themselves to actually tackle these things. Because in a relationship, it's almost impossible to tackle the personal stuff without having your partner in on it the whole way.
Oh, yeah. And right. I straight up actually I had that problem actually yesterday with my boyfriend. We don't ever really get into fights, but, like, some of my past trauma has been influencing my actions in a way that has been negatively affecting my boyfriend, but because of his emotional traumas and experiences growing up and how he learned how to deal with things, he never fucking told me this stuff. And so it all accumulated into this big blow up thing over something really stupid when we finally got to the core of it, wasn't the issue at all. And being able to not only recognize and talk about your trauma, even with just yourself, but trying to be open and talk that stuff with another person, that's like, it's scary, but it's also so very important, because you cannot really have a relationship, like, one, without communication, obviously, and two, like, you need to be conscious of your own shit before you call out somebody else's shit.
Of course. And if someone doesn't own up to that accountability, it makes it feel like it's a one-sided sort of deal permanently. Like, things won't ever change in a sense.
Yeah, like, I definitely have felt that. And again, it's a reflection of also my traumas, because I've learned that I have an issue with trust to a very weird extent, and a lot of it is reflecting on traumas from when I was a kid.
It's kind of like fire starting, you know, like when there is no fires, you start one. Because I'll tell you why I think, maybe not in this situation directly, but you're inspiring a thought.
Okay.
And what the thought is, that what people will do when they have trauma or they're wired backwards is they will find an area that they feel needs to be different. So sometimes they will scorch the landscape to recreate, like a destroy and rebuild sort of thing.
I think that's indicative of a certain type of trauma behavior.
Yeah.
Like, when you have trauma, you inevitably learn to act in a certain way, or better yet, react. How you react to situations, and in some cases, when there is nothing wrong, that means there's something wrong. So I feel that's when you need.
Is that like double talk, or do you mean literally when there's nothing wrong, there's something wrong?
Yeah,
because
like
you're wired backwards?
Yes, because like you're so used to there being something wrong that when there's nothing, and so
the fire
to
started.
feel normal, it's quote unquote normal, whatever that actually is, because trauma in a sense becomes comfortable, and like having that feeling of something wrong, you need to feel that, like, because that's, you know, that feeling more so than the feeling of, oh, there's nothing wrong.
Would you think that we would consider that a light mental disruption or disorder?
Yeah.
Something that maybe comes and goes?
Yeah, I think it is a trauma response.
Yeah.
It doesn't...
But I don't think that it's classified as such.
Well, because that's what self-sabotage is, right?
So, well, in a sense, yes. In correlation to what we're talking about, yes. But what I mean, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is that when trauma is spoken on, it's separated from that. Because you look at it as its own thing. You don't look at it as being tied to a disorder of some sort. You know, you look at it more as an experimental thing, or like something that you've experienced, rather. Like an experience sort of thing. As opposed to something that's more deeply ingrained. Something that happens to you in a reactionary way externally, as opposed to something internal.
Well, I think a lot of external, like, influences the internal. So,
yeah.
Again, that's kind of very much my mindset of, like, everything is an experience. Because everything around you, whether it's tactile or like visual, smell, like, mentally, your thoughts, everything is just a part of your conscious. Everything is boiled down to your consciousness. Like, so whatever you experience is going to influence.
I guess what I'm trying to say is the relation from something happening to you that makes you fucked up, and something that is happening inside of you that you eventually are, like, mentally fucked up about. Like when you have a mental disorder, that's something that develops almost organically internally, right? But like something that's a trauma, outward, exterior, you know.
Well, no, okay, because like I've dealt with very heavy depression.
Yeah.
And actually, this brings me to a thought that I had during an earlier part of the conversation. Like, me going through one of my worst depression holes, actually, like, it forced me to start trying to help deal with my trauma, because that was the only way I was going to get myself out. And it was so bad. Like, for 2 years. 2 years, all I did was lay in bed. I ate at night, and I either slept or I watched anime, which is how I ended up watching so much anime, which is another fucking story.
You fucking binged it?
Yes.
What's your favorite anime?
Oh, I can't answer that question. I have too many.
Oof.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
Nice.
No, but like the whole, what you were saying though, like depression can be either environmental or, like, I've also read that some people argue that it's a chemical imbalance. I've also read that maybe that's not necessarily the case. I don't know for sure. I love to see more research on it.
I believe that it is definitely a chemical imbalance.
Well, yeah.
Definitely.
And that's the thing, though, is like depression can be brought on by environmental factors, or
totally.
it can just be
the seasonal depression.
Yeah. Or it can just be brought on by something internal.
Or there's cosmos depression. Mercury retrograde.
That's just to make yourself feel better.
I know. It's just funny how, because people can, the power of the mind. People can manipulate themselves into being sick. People can manipulate themselves into being healthy.
The placebo effect and hypochondria.
People don't understand it, but that's like a lot of, like, the rewiring of the brain, the reprogramming, the relearning, re-educating of self. Like,
well, and like there is straight up like research on that, because like you have to like change the synapses in your brain, like to change things. Like it's kind of crazy how everything all works, but like I don't think that there is necessarily a 100% clear answer on how to do all of that. You kind of just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
Which is why there's so many different types of therapies, because not every therapy works for the same trauma in everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I see new things all the time, and I just wonder, like is this proven to be very effective in some sort of region, or like where do they do the case studies for these kind of things?
Well, yeah, and that's like, I've always been a huge fan of science, and I really, really like the whole order, and I don't, rigidity is not quite the word that I want to use, but it's very like, in order to get a good research, you need to select your samples and your experiment to have the least variables possible, so you get the clearest answer. Mm-hmm. But God damn it, I lost my train of thought right in the middle of talking. That's fantastic. I forgot what I was going with this. I'm so sorry.
Hey, that happens to me quite often. But rewiring, reprogramming specifically, I owe a lot of it to self-improvement, documentaries, audiobooks, podcasts that I listen to. Like, I've just taken in so many different forms of information via media like YouTube, and what I always am finding myself happy about is that I feel like I've done some sort of like fitness for like the mind, body, and the soul. Well, not so much body, but if it does motivate me to like diet and then walk and stuff like that, that's where that component would come into play.
I feel the same, because
it really
like,
does help in the.
Well, because like I mean, like at the sake, or I guess at the risk of sounding vain, like I feel like a better version of myself, so I feel like I've become slightly more superior than I was, and it makes me feel like, oh well, if I'm doing that with my brain and my trauma and shit, I should also get my body in shape. So it's a whole package deal instead of a half-assed thing. You're
finding that you're more aerodynamic, because like we can cut through things a lot slicker when we're having our shit together.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, there's nothing that can really slow us down or stop us besides ourselves. Besides our old, lower version of ourselves. Like, our de-evolution, so to speak.
Well, and, like, by dealing with trauma, specifically in the way of, like, how you behave, because trauma definitely influences how you behave, how you view things, how you're going to react to things right away. Like, if you try to work on that for the better, like, you're going to be able to deal with future trauma, especially similar trauma, in a better way than you were the first time you had to experience with no experience of it all. And, like, I think that's very important, especially since humans are very emotional creatures. And, like, I feel having more control over that is going to lead to a happier life. Not necessarily like you need to control your emotions, because that in itself can be a trauma. But like coping strategies, for one, are a great example. Like, it's a very important thing to have. And I feel like therapy is one of those things that everybody should try, at least to find somebody who you can talk to about things. Because that is, in my experience, one of the most important ways of overcoming things, because you're relating it with somebody else, you get the validation that, yes, this is a real thing, you're dealing with this, as well as, even better, if you find other people who can relate, because that makes it even more real and more easily approached in a healing way, because other people have dealt with this. Other people know what you're going through. Maybe not exactly what you're going through, but they can relate enough where, like, you're not alone in it. And I think that is a very important thing. Yeah. I feel like I kind of go on, like, random tangents in the middle of getting to the point of something else.
It's a big picture view. And what you do is you paint one corner, you paint a little bit in the middle, you go get the other corner. That's how it's supposed to be, because if someone's listening, it's going to impact them a lot more if they're following you the whole way. And that's what's important about podcasts, especially when you do them in long form. From what I found, is that is the longer that you listen and stay locked in and captivated, the more you obviously get from the conversation, right?
Yeah.
But there's just something else that happens to you when you watch it. You accept it as some sort of special form of media, almost like if you're into podcasts, it becomes your main thing.
Oh yeah, I know a lot of people who are like, yes, podcasts.
It is because of how captivating it truly is. Because music always propelled me through life, right?
Same.
I made music, I listened to music all the time, but not until I was old enough to really be patient with something, when I started taking on podcasts in my early 20s. Did I start to realize that I was taking a lot more from a podcast than I did a song or an album, so to speak. Like, I have my favorite rappers, and yeah, there was a time period where my brain was still developing, because I was young enough to be a hip-hop fan at that age, and I was soaking in so many different concepts, from the metaphors and the double entendres and everything that was going on in the lyrical rap that I was listening to, that what it did was it really propelled and fast-forwarded my growth. Yeah, so I was mentally jumping years.
Yeah.
In a sense. And like, I think there was me and my sister had a college reading level like in 6th grade, right?
Oh yeah, that was, yeah.
So that's how she is. But like me, I had like this crazy brain that was able to freestyle and rhyme words for hours,
yeah.
That was my superpower. And it's just amazing how like I was able to use mine for something like in that direction. You know, shout out to my sister. She still reads pretty good. But like, I was able to do something with it and create an upward trajectory for it that just continues to go upwards. And I'm really proud of that, because I want to create a blueprint for kids in the future that want to follow my trajectory, as far as like the things that I chose to do and the way that I chose to present it. If you were able to take that from an observatory like perception, and able to apply it to your life, what would happen is you would have your own version of what I did. It would have your identity ingrained in it. Yeah. So it would be your product, essentially.
Yeah.
The same way that when you hear Kendrick Lamar, you don't think that he's copying Jay-Z or Andre 3000 or...
Well, it's the same. It's the same with pretty much anything. You have to basically take the formula of whatever it is and make it your own, and that's what makes people successful, because the innovation. It's the same with, like, I've been thinking about it a lot in terms of like cooking, because like I told you, I got a scholarship to go to Le Cordon Bleu, and I was stupid enough to throw it away. But like, looking at who is out there, especially nowadays in the years of mass media on multiple different levels, and the accessibility of everything, and the televisation of cooking shows and competitions and things, like, the people who are really, really high up there in the culinary world, their minds are insane to me. Like, the innovations that they come up with are so crazy, and to me, like, it's daunting, because they were so special enough in their way of thinking that they came up with something that I could never in a million years fathom or come up with. And I think that's the same with music. You're taking a formula, and you're making your own twist on it, as it were. And yeah, I feel like that's the same for pretty much anything.
It's like a movie director, like Quentin Tarantino.
Well, yeah, and that's even the thing. You have famous directors who they have their own style.
Yeah, Scorsese, Kubrick, like these are Steven Spielberg, like Michael Bay,
yeah,
Christopher Nolan. Like you could just name these guys, and you could just think of the movies immediately when you hear the name.
Exactly, and the type of style. Like Michael Bay has now become synonymous with action movies, big cinematic like visuals. Yeah.
Like
and
fucking
explosions.
Yeah, they've mocked him. Like he became the meme for the explosion.
Yep. And then you have James Cameron, who made these fantastical worlds that are absolutely ridiculous.
Titanic and
Avatar. Yeah.
I heard that when people saw Avatar, about 40% of people who saw that were more depressed because reality wasn't as cool as the movie.
Oh man, I remember seeing that when it first came out. I saw it in 3D at the movie theater, or the standalone one over by Olive Garden.
Cool.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen an IMAX movie?
I have. I actually saw the second of the newest trilogy of Star Wars movies. Don't ask. I know this makes me sound so bad, especially as a nerd and a Star Wars fan.
Is today the 4th?
Yeah, it is!
Oh, wow.
Oh, is it anymore? Oh, we just passed. It's now Revenge of the Sith.
Oh, my gosh. Blasphemy. No, continue with your blasphemy.
But anyways, yeah, like, I actually saw Titanic. Speaking of Titanic, I saw that in the IMAX theater when I was in 4th grade because my father and stepmom, when we were on visitation over there, took us to the Pacific Science Center, and they had a whole Titanic exhibit. It started, you got handed a boarding pass of somebody who really was on the Titanic, and in the end, you get to see if he survived or not. I was a servant, I don't remember her name, but I somehow was the only one that survived in my family. Funny. But yeah, like the whole exhibit was cool as hell. You had a piece of the hull that was there, and you had like some like ice that was as cold as an iceberg was, so you get to like touch and feel how cold like the whole thing was really cool. But at the end, you also got to go see the new Titanic movie in IMAX.
Wow.
And that was cool as hell. But I also saw one of the newer Star Wars movies a couple of years ago over there. It was really cool. That's actually how I got like the banger scar on my arm, because like I went with a friend. We decided, like, because we would go on day trips to either Seattle, Portland, or Spokane. We would smoke along the way. We would smoke there, and I had one of my little rigs, and this was back in the day where I dabbed very badly, and I torched it till it was red hot, and then you take the never again. But because the bangers were that hot, I had them. We were sitting in the car in the garage right before the movie. Right. I had the freshly heated up rig, and I reached with my other arm across to grab something from the cup holder and right into my arm. So I spent half that movie with like the cup of ice drink just pressed against my arm. But yeah, it was pretty fun. I think that's the only time I've ever gone to a movie theater high as fuck, but it was good.
We went to that same place on a field trip, and I think we saw some fucking nature movie. But we also went to like, because Tritech, we had radio broadcasting. We had a field trip. We had a field trip at Daily, rest in peace. He just passed like 2 weeks ago or something like that.
What? This is the first I've heard of that.
No, it was all over Facebook. Yeah.
Well, that's why I haven't been on Facebook in years.
And I'm pretty sure the paper and everything have
I
printed it.
I also haven't read the paper.
But that's what happened. He died.
Damn.
It's really sad because he played a big part in I learned from him because I'm pretty sure because he knew I was the rapper, so he wanted to get like a program for like people like me, you know. So he got the Fruity Loops, and he let us like one day out of the week we would go in there and work on music that we wanted.
Oh man,
So we were making beats and stuff with Ed. I took the program home one time without like asking, and I put it on my computer and I brought it back. I think that he knew, but he was so cool that he didn't care. Like he wasn't gonna say anything.
I had a pirated version of Fruity Loop Studio.
You know the vibes.
I do. I started making a thing because, as you know, I'm also really into EDM, so that's where that came from.
You made your own EDM beats?
I was trying to. That was also at this floatless stage when I was going to CBC the first time after high school. The start of my depression hole, and I would try to do that on the computer. Either that, or I had a digital drawing tablet for the computer, and I would do stuff in Photoshop, either with photography stuff or like digital art. I think at the time I was just like trying to find something to like bring me joy, and as well as give me something to do that wasn't mind-numbing like school was at the time.
Yeah, just latch onto something.
Yeah.
Another thing about Ed Daly, another cool story.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to commandeer the...
No, I just don't want to leave Ed Daly real quick.
No.
But Seattle.
Yeah.
He took us to the road trip for Tritech.
Mm-hmm.
We went to Seattle, and he let us just roam Pike Street, right? Whoa, there was a strip club right there on Pike Street.
Yep, I know which one.
And you know what? Me and my friends went into the strip club on the road trip while we were going to high school, right? Well, we were 18, so we could go. So we went in there, and it was crazy because there was one girl dancing to like, what's the Doors song? The 5 to 1. 5 to 1. The Jay-Z sample did for the Takeover, but she was dancing to that shit, and that song is just a banger. So it was just a really cool vibe when you walked in. You felt like you were walking into like something that you totally were like not so fucking supposed to be into. And it was just such a vibe. It was so intoxicated. So we were there kicking it. We were drinking our one little cup of pop, and like when it was done, we had to like leave, or else we'd buy another cup of pop for like $5. So we ended up leaving or whatever, and we had a bunch of those like little handout cards that they give out. But when we got back, word got around that somebody went to the strip club, and then eventually came out that we did it, but we didn't get in trouble. Nobody really even talked about it. But the funny thing is that being the cool guy that Ed is, I would not be surprised if he almost did that intentionally. Because isn't that kind of like a story that you would hear in the past, like in the 80s or 70s, like where kids were, snuck into it seems like an old time sort of thing, right?
A little bit, yeah.
So we experienced that in the 2000s. You know what I'm saying? And there'll never be another time like that.
Yeah, probably not.
That's the end of that because of the culture that we go into now. Like it's a different place because kids going to a strip club, like you just don't. That's like an 80s movie. Like you just don't hear of that anymore, right?
Yeah. Well,
Ever.
I mean, I would say like that has the same type of vibe as like, you remember like the early 2000s movies?
Yeah. Okay.
Like
yeah,
American Pie.
But those were like the version of the 80s. Movies.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the same vibe.
Yeah. So now is about the time where they're going to start doing those kind of movies again. I mean,
every 20 years or so.
Every 20 years. Isn't that crazy how like the industry's already figured out, like they know what they're gonna drop.
Well, it also depends on what's going on at the time, because that has a big influence on what people want to watch. And considering that how things are right now with like the way the politics are environmentally, like the whole coming out of 2 years of COVID bullshit, like that I was reading, I wish I had more information because I feel like, I read this one thing. No, I was reading on how it's been affecting what people are watching, like what types of things that they're more into, and there's like a lot more escapism type thing because, well, I mean, we were 2 years under lockdown that was way too long.
Yeah. Well, look what it did to everybody's mental health.
Yeah.
Besides the kids.
I remember reading...
for the most part, the young kids.
Even as last year, as we hit the year mark, like there was a very significant toll and uptick in people's mental health, and it was being debated, and it is still now, like the effects that the lockdown, especially for so long, had on society as a whole, its mental health.
Yes, and I want to correct that. It did have an effect on kids of certain age groups, but I had a young daughter at the time, so I was like raising her through the pandemic.
Yeah.
So for the most part, my little girl doesn't know a world before the pandemic.
Oh yeah. After, like, if they're young enough, then that's not going to be. It's
but
for
the older people.
Yeah. From I would say, from kids who are old enough to be going to school or preschool, that's when it's going to start affecting them, especially if that school or daycare or whatever is such a huge part in their lives. That being suddenly disrupted and seeing their parents under stress, that's going to be a big thing. Especially since social interaction is such a big thing that is needed for a little kid. Or, well, just in general, but like for kids it's very important, because socializing is one of the ways that they learn, and it affects their mental health significantly.
Oh yeah. And it's just amazing how like certain demographics were affected in such a way that they became violent, and they became very they're like,
well, because like it's pent amplified. It's also pent up frustration, because there's been so many different things going back and forth. Like the whole process of the pandemic was handled so poorly that it had a detrimental effect in and of itself.
Financial effects.
There's so many stresses. Like, you have health worries, you have other people taking out their frustrations on other people, you have yourself being frustrated, and the stress, money problems, like paranoia if you're really worried about, getting sick, which I had to deal with real bad. But
see, I always worked like a daytime job, right? And during the pandemic I did get let go from the job. And I went immediately into a different job just to continue to pay the bills. But the thing about it was, I never went on unemployment. Not that I have a knock on anybody who went on unemployment, but there was people who literally just like sat on unemployment.
Yep. Well, and honestly, there were a couple people who did that at my old job, but honestly, I cannot blame them, because especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when everything was like real bad, like the added stress of being in a service job, especially for a company that even at the best of times don't give a fuck about you, but in the middle of a pandemic really don't, and being told that you're an essential worker, which just means disposable, it took a big toll. And I definitely did not have anything bad to say about the people who are like, fuck this. And like, I know a couple of people who needed to get themselves fired, so they just like stopped giving a fuck until they were fired. And I honestly, I can't blame them. I really can't blame them necessarily.
Yeah, I can't blame them either. I just wouldn't be one of them, because like I was trying to like build a career and trying to be in grow with the company or corporation. So like it wasn't, being on unemployment was kind of like just the most depressed idea that I could think. Like it would have hit me so hard mentally that I just couldn't sit on that, because I had a little girl and all these things, right?
Oh yeah.
So I jumped right into a job, but I didn't care what kind of job it was. It was delivering parts, for minimum wage, and no tips. And I did that for about 8 months, and then I got into this other job that I'm at currently, where I'm happy at. And the thing about it is that it took a long time for me to kind of pull myself out of like that initial pandemic hole that I fell into, because I had to move at the same time that the pandemic really became official.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so it was around the time that I literally had like
had a lot of big things happening.
Big things happening all at once. It was like the most detrimental like health-wise ever.
Yeah.
So I was probably at my like mentally the weakest probably that I had been, but the problem was that I didn't think that it was a problem and a solution, because I didn't think that it was anything. I thought that this was just me going through the motions.
Yep.
But I was picking up drinking a lot. Like I was drinking more and more and more and more and more, and I became an alcoholic to a certain extent. And then what I needed to do was I needed to go back to my grassroots, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And by doing so, I was able to like reset my boundaries, on what I allowed myself to do.
Yeah, like
and you're
I
not
can relate
able,
with that so much.
And you're not able to do so unless you have to kind of wear it out of your system. Like you got to get tired of yourself. You got to get sick and tired of the way that you're acting and the way that you're thinking. And then what happens after that is that you stop giving into it.
Well, yeah,
it's like a toxic relationship where you're done.
I mean, you know how much I would rage and go on and on about the bullshit I had to endure at my last job, which, as a quick reminder, I was there for 5.5 years.
Oh, shit.
That job and the people and the toxicity that I dealt with, I literally was made to cry by 2 of the people, one of them being one of the managers, within like the first month of me being there. And I let myself get put through so much bad shit that I literally have trauma just from my job and how I was treated in situations I had to be in. But like, I was just, looking back on it in hindsight, especially since I also got a new job that I'm way happier at, like, is so much better. But looking back on things in hindsight, like, I really don't have an answer as to why I let myself go through all of that. Because at the time I was like, well, if I just endure it, it's gonna be fine. Or like, oh, this isn't that bad. But looking at it when you're not in the midst of it, then you can really see how really fucked up things can be. But in the moment, a lot of the time, I think for a lot of people, it would be safe to say that it's I'm reluctant to say a survival thing, but a coping thing maybe?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah, where you're like downplaying it at the moment so that way you don't have to necessarily deal with the heaviness of everything. I don't know. Yeah. I'm also not a therapist at all, so I don't know if I'm just talking out of my ass or not.
Right. But I mean, you can recognize what that is. I mean, in our head, we can diagnose ourselves to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're well versed in things you're interested in.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to be one of your, things that you're all about.
Honestly, like, I've discovered a very big passion in trying to self-help myself. And not in a way where I need to be like, oh, you need to do this for your self-help, you need to like correct your behavior, blah blah blah. It's more of like,
not affirmations, but
it's a me thing. I don't need to like go trying to spread my passion for other people, but I will advocate for people who want to do that.
Yeah.
Because I am a big believer in it, because I've found that it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I just want to, for the sake of both of us, I want to say that any of the political, religious, medical, anything that you hear on here is just strictly 2 people that are fucking, they don't know shit. We're more comedians than anything. We're more rappers than anything. We're more funny than anything. Because I don't like the idea that people want to hold you to your ideas and your beliefs. Especially if it's a conversation that's supposed to be just for fun. I believe a cancel culture is really something that if you're not careful, you can get sucked into.
That, and I feel like, okay, I'm not saying that a lot of the time that it's the case, but like sometimes the words that people choose to get their point across, like, we have so many synonyms in our language because those varying differences make a difference in how your point comes across. And I think, well, one person's like, no, I meant this, and you're like, no, I heard you say this. Like, yeah. I feel like it can be easily misconstrued.
I think your inability to articulate is what really puts you as a target.
Well, yeah, and I also feel like a lot of the time people cannot get past the fact that, like, oh, just because you said this one time, I guess that's what's branded on you forever, instead of like, oh, I can change my views, or nuance. Visit these views again and reiterate, like, in a better way.
Yeah, of course, because people can grow and their views can change in a more understanding towards their age group demographic.
Yeah.
And I understand that completely. I think that my issue is I remember a world where you could literally have a conversation with somebody out in the real world, and there was no ramifications for a conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you didn't like the person or what they were saying, you respect them for having the courage to even say something, and that was where dialogue is created. Well, we're going into a world where people are being shamed out of a conversation, so you only hear one side of a conversation, and it's like whoever has the most money.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're going to have one team that has all of these things nailed down politically. And then the other one's going to have all these things nailed down. So you're going to have your advantages and your disadvantages. And it's just going to be a continuous, like, perpetual culture war. Because people will naturally gravitate towards their economical standings, first and foremost. Their personal views when it comes to marriage, school, like everything in that manner. And then you're going to have the flip side. The side that thinks that they're a little bit more well put together and more financially stable, and it's almost like the ones that kind of hide their problems, like you know, the ones that like to create a veil, where the family's picture perfect in the front of it.
And then everything is fucked up in multiple different ways behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. Like where they're either hiding, you know, an affair, alcoholism, drug use, or a bunch of the same.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I believe that there is a benefit to being transparent in a sense where your kids can learn that it's okay to make mistakes and not be a perfect person, as opposed to putting the pressure on them where they feel that they have to be some cookie cutter bullshit in order to get the approval of their family.
Well, yeah, and like I had this thought actually, like before I was even out of high school, that. Like, I grew up in a very Catholic family. My grandma and her family, very Catholic. My grandpa, at one point he was religious, but my grandma being such a religious diehard kind of, like, pushed him away. My mom has been always religious, and I had to go to Catholic school, which, side note, was worse bullying than any public school I experienced.
Girls on girl bullying? Guys bullying girls?
Anyone bullying. Like, it's because of the school that I went to.
I guess you're right.
Because
hazing comes in all forms.
Yeah, I have multiple different stories from different grades.
I was thinking about my own, because, you know, unfortunately, male privilege is a thing.
Yep.
So we experience things in a different lens. Mm-hmm. And I make the mistake of defaulting to my perspective when it comes to these kind of things, and I miss a whole bunch by doing that. So I've been trying to like step back and allowing like different perspectives to fill the canvas more. So I like to catch myself in those situations, and you're totally right. And what programs us to think almost the way that I've thought is the movies and the shows that we watched when we were growing up, because they create one narrative that you think like, okay, well that's all the situations.
And if you take a look at it, especially like in the time that we were growing up, because we're pretty close in age, so we experienced a lot of the same things,
same media,
but like a lot of it's male driven.
It's so, like how like right-handers like get everything.
Like left-handed people, like my boyfriend's left-handed, and like we definitely experience things are made for right-hand people.
What a comparison that the right hand is the man and the left hand is the woman. Like if you were to look at that speaks a lot to like how things were for a long time. You know, and sorry to cut you off, Tesla made a prediction in 1926, I believe, that the shift was going to be that we were going to be in a woman-dominated future.
I mean, if you look at how history has gone about treating women and the continued I'm trying to say a word. Perpetuation. I don't even know that's probably not.
Yeah, well,
but like
maybe a combination of two.
Perpetuating this thing with women, like through centuries, and like, I mean, that kind of a thing becomes a generational memory, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And like, it's going to come to a point.
Follow me on this real concept real quick. The Tesla thing about women dominating the future with technology's help, in a sense. and you think OnlyFans, and you think of like how like bad that girl Danielle, Catch Me Outside from Dr. Phil.
No,
Yeah, how she made $53 million off of OnlyFans.
I know.
In only like 8 months or something, and I might be off on that, but
I think because
is this the future that's kind of he's describing in a sense?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think in my view of things, that's like, and that's fine if people don't agree with me. I don't care. But in my personal view, I really think it's because men are more easily influenced by sexual things, and women have learned to use that to advantage.
Yes.
And like they have,
and that's what I was gonna
always. But
yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what I wanted to connect to what we were saying. That, and I thought it would be controversial to say that, because I wouldn't want all women to think that I'm saying this specifically about women in general.
Well, yeah.
But what I wanted to say is that they've developed the skeleton key, so to speak, to unlock any door.
And like that I was not trying to make a generalization that all women are using sexual.
No, but you're speaking just in this instance when we're talking about.
There are some women who do use that to their advantage.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot deny that that's not there. That is not all women. That is not the majority of women.
Right, but we're speaking to a certain.
Like a certain specific situation, and like.
And it could just be a situational thing. Maybe it's not like a totally embodiment of a person.
Well, and I also feel like a lot of the time for women, like sex is a complicated subject, and sexualization, especially with how women are automatically sexualized, especially a lot of the times at such a young age, and like the perceived rights that men have for women and their sexualization, like. God damn it, I'm losing my train of thought again.
No, it's a heavy concept. That's why I wanted us to kind of like tiptoe through it in a sense, because it is kind of heavy.
Like, okay, I have a lot of thoughts going on in my brain, and trying to organize them all into a cohesive thought to get my point across accurately is a little difficult at the moment.
See, and I wanted this to be like a new segment that I'm doing for like the Tory Talk podcast, where I have more of like a conversation with an individual.
Okay.
So rather than me having like a Joe Rogan style like interview podcast thing going on, I want there to also be like different like series, like a different where like for example the title of this could be just like what we've talked about. You know, we could like bullet point it, and I'm thinking this on the fly. And the cool thing about my listeners, they know that I do everything like in real time. Yeah. So they're listening to this and they're gonna read the title just as it is. But I think that's what's cool. It's almost as interactive as I could possibly get at this point. But I want to kind of wrap this one up because we've talked about a lot of great things.
Oh, I know. I feel like I like could touch on all of these subjects way more. Yeah, I'm taking so many tangents.
We'll have to definitely do another one because I want to continue the series where, you know, like my friends who like, let's say you're not a scientist or you didn't write a book or you didn't make an album, you still have a good point of view. Like I want to hear that, and I want the world to hear that too. So I got friends that are psychologists. I got friends that, you know, work at fucking wineries. I got friends that do all sorts of different shit. I would like to see what their perspectives are on different things, also while finding out what they like and what they do.
Well, and honestly, I like that kind of a thing because it gives a different perspective, because everyone's perspective is going to be different, either based on how they were raised or just based on what they're doing.
Hey, the grass is greener where you water it.
Yeah.
And I believe that rather than giving your attention to national or global like entities that don't come back home, you could do it here, and then we can all reap the benefits of the garden, so to speak.
Yeah, honestly, I follow that mindset. You need to water your garden.
That's right.
And don't shit where you eat. So.
Exactly. All right, so we're just gonna be signing off. Tory Talk Podcast.
See you.